I must get on with the talk though. We have a number of slides and I've got the control here, so do I click the button? Yes. So you can see here, Beyond the Pilgrimage, Finding the Buddha in the Heart of the Journey. Fabulous title, isn't it? And as I mentioned in the first part, where did it come from? ChatGPT, isn't it? Really. And it's a good title. I think it's a good title. Aya, if you would like, Aya Santa's here, and she actually put this presentation together. We worked on it. If you'd like to be able to watch it, you can see it from over there on the screen. I know she's seen it all before, as they say. So anyway, and this, of course, is a photo at the Vulture's Peak in Rajagaha. There we are. And you see the maps there. These are much a bit more simplified than the previous maps we had in part one. So you can see the major area. It doesn't look big, but it is. When you're travelling by bus, I can tell you, it's quite a long way. And as you saw in the lead-up video, 19 days on the bus. So, and here's the ancient map that Venerable Ananda Jyoti did, showing the various places, using the names that were used at the time of the Buddha. And so we can move on. We've got to move on. Isn't this nice? You've got a little circle where the town is. So this is Rajagaha. And last part one I mentioned too that the Buddha was born, I'll just give the recap, born in Lumbini, sort of on the road with his mother. And I also mentioned he was brought up in Kapilavatthu. You can see that towards the top. You can see Lumbini near the Nepal, where it says Nepal. That's where the Buddha was born. And Kapilavatthu, where he grew up. And he said that he was delicately nurtured, extremely delicately nurtured. And at 29, he undertook the noble search to search for the end of old age, sickness and death. So that was it. And then we go to near Bodh Gaya. You can see Bodh Gaya down the bottom, and that's where the Buddha became enlightened. But before he became enlightened, he was practicing these austerities, these really tough practices in a cave named Prag Bodhi cave near Bodh Gaya, until he realized this was not the right way to practice to become enlightened. And so he gave up those austerities, particularly really eating so little, and had his first meal, the milk rice from Sujata, and then undertook the middle way, where he had enough strength to be able to practice the jhanas. And this is what he realized was the breakthrough, would lead to the breakthrough. And then one evening, really, under the Bodhi tree near the river Naranja, under the full moon, he awakened to the Four Noble Truths and spent 6 or 7 weeks digesting that experience. It must have been really awesome, really overwhelming, and he even contemplated not teaching until the Brahma Sampati said, please, please teach. There are those that will understand, those with little dust in their eyes. So the Buddha did, and he eventually went to Varanasi, to the deer park, where he met the 5 former companions who thought he had given up. He'd lost the plot. He'd given up the real practice, the tough practice, and had reverted to luxury eating. And there he taught them, of course, the famous Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. So that was the beginning of the Sangha, when those 5 monks, only after they had a breakthrough to stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment, did they ask for ordination to become a Buddhist monk. And then after that, the Buddha travels later to Gaya, where he teaches the 1,000 fire-worshipping ascetics or monks the discourse called burning, which was very appropriate for those monks. So that's where we left the Buddha in part 1. And then from there, he moved on to Rajagaha. And this is where we are now, Rajgir. And those 1,000 former fire worshipping disciples travelled with him as well. So it must have been quite a group that came. We're getting a lot of whistling, aren't we? The kettle's on. Sounds like the kettle. There we are. And of course at Rajagaha, you can see in this slide the bamboo grove, Valavana. And this was the first monastery offered to the Buddha after his awakening, so probably his second rains retreat. A very interesting thing happened when he arrived in Rajagaha. It must have had with 1,000 monks there, and the Buddha, and also at that time Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana joined the Buddha with 250 of their companions too. So 1,250 of them. Where do you put them? And of course it must have been an accommodation problem. And then King Bimbisara offered this first monastery, and they built very simple huts. And this is the famous Valavana, the bamboo grove. Can you see some bamboos? These are actually, the picture on the left has got some bamboos in it, and also you can see the dam on the right. And this is where the Buddha gave famous teaching on, they say, the full moon in February to the 1,250 enlightened monks. And that was the advice to monastics, the famous Ovada Patimokkha, which people may recognise. Sabba papasa karanang kusalasa upasampada sachita pariyoda panang etang buddhana sasanang. And you can see the pond there, which would have been used for bathing. Interestingly, when I went there in 2005, the pond was smaller. They've really developed the bamboo grove. It looks beautiful now. It looks really nice. The other site's pretty much the same, but this one different. And so here's a bit more. I think this starts. Does it start by itself?
Just press it one more time.
Just again? That's it, I think. So that gives you an idea of the bamboo grove. You can sort of see a lot more bamboos there. And this is the advice that I mentioned, not to do any evil, to embrace the good. This is Ajahn Bhante Sujato's translation, to purify one's mind. This is the instruction of the Buddhas, all the Buddhas. And of course, this is the real essence of spiritual practice, to give up the negative, the bad, through body, speech and mind, and to undertake all those good practices, those good states, actions, good speech and good mind states, and then to purify the mind through meditation and wisdom. So this is the instruction of all the Buddhas. And it gives them, in brief, the whole teaching, really, of the Buddha. These first two are right effort, if you see that as right effort, giving up all the negative, usually we say avoiding or letting go of any negative mind states, and developing wholesome or positive mind states. So this is a famous teaching, and in Thailand it's a big a ceremony. I think one of the most popular ceremonies in the year, one of the biggest. There's Vesak, and of course the Katina, and this one is very, very big too. In Sri Lanka, not at all. Don't know why. And there, and of course still in Rajagaha or Rajgir, a favourite place of the Buddha. We think it's a favourite place because it's on a peak, one of the mountain peaks around this city. It's surrounded by mountains. And so it's just away from the city. And today particularly, you can get that feeling it's quite remote. And what you're seeing in the middle is, of course, the walls of the kuti that was where the Buddha stayed. Whether they're the original walls, who knows? That's where his kuti was. And we, of course, we're here. You can see us on the left doing a circumambulation, and in the middle, either meditating. Oh no, I think here we're doing some chanting, and we did meditation. At 4 a.m, we set out for it at 4 a.m. One of the difficulties with the Buddhist sites is you've got to be early to avoid the crowds because nobody else came, which was good. So it was a very... And you can see on the right someone meditating in a tent, and that was Ajahn Nito. We had 6 monastics, I, myself, Ajahn Nito, Ajahn Chunda, Ajahn Bodhidharma, and Venerable Vasagga. But this is Ajahn Nito, and every site he'd pop his tent out and meditate. Wasn't that fantastic? That's what the Buddha would say. Go for it. He would, because this is really where we meet the Buddha, is really in meditation. When we experience states of mind that the Buddha experienced, when we experience insights that the Buddha experienced, and of course, if we make breakthroughs to any of the stages of awakening. And on the right, can you see people peering into a hole? This is the famous Boar's Cave, and it's where Venerable Sariputta became fully enlightened. About a week, or no, 2 weeks, I think, after he'd become a stream enterer, when he met Venerable Assaji going on alms round in the city, Rajagaha. So there we are. Here we are. This is the video. That's it. There we are. It was cold too. I can tell you, at 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't think India's cold? Go in December. There we are. And of course then we moved on to nearby. You can see Rajgir or Rajgaha. It's very close to Nalanda. They're the 2 circles. They're very close to each other. And this is of course where the Buddha went there several times, stayed there several times in, I think it's Pavarika's mango grove, and gave some really important teachings there too. But later it became world famous. And when I say world famous, it was even supported by the kings of Indonesia, Java, it was called then. And you can see here the walls, quite substantial ruins. And what we see with most of the ruins is only a small area, really. There's a lot more of the ruins under people's fields, under their houses, all that sort of thing. And so you're seeing these monasteries. There were 9 monasteries in this university, and they say that it had 10,000 students. And it flourished between the 427 BC and up to 1400, but it was attacked and burnt in 1200 by Muhammad Bakhtiar, and but continued on after it. It was world famous. It was really a major place, and you can see on the right, this was a room where with Master Xuanzang he lived. He was a famous Chinese monk who came all the way from China, spent, I heard, 22 years in India, quite a few years here at Nalanda, and was a student but also a teacher. And he carried back heaps of the texts for translation in China. And that was really supported by the emperors. And so those translations, they give us extra information really about the Buddha's teachings, and they're a very valuable source. Can you see the hole on the right in the right-hand photo? That was where they say Xuanzang used to meditate. It's a little chamber in there, very small. It's a bit like a cupboard, really. And he used to go in there and meditate, definitely. So that gives you an idea of Nalanda, famous place. And interestingly, in 2010, the Indian government, they started a new Nalanda University. It's a postgraduate university, so it's continuing the tradition, but it's really for people doing masters, PhDs, and it's a research university, that's what they call it. So there we are. And this is the really impressive stupa for Venerable Sariputta, whose village was either in the land or very close to it. And when he was passing away, he came back to stay there. His mother, She had no faith in Buddhism, even though her son had been a Buddhist monk for many, many years, was chief in wisdom. And still she had no faith in him. But in this story, they tell, as he was passing away, all these great beings, like Mahabrahma and Sakka, the king of the gods, all came to visit him to pay respects because they knew he was passing into parinibbana. And his mother, she noticed there was a lot of light in the room. And so she came and asked him, son, what were these lights? And he said, this was Mahabrahma came to pay respects. Sakka came to pay respects. Then she got faith. Then she realised her son was someone special because Mahabrahma was who she really worshipped. She was a Brahmin. So this is the memorial that probably developed over time. So this would have been later when the university really developed. It may have been a smaller stupa, a smaller monument. So beautiful. And it was there that the Buddha gave teaching about the three miracles. The miracle, he was asked by somebody to do a display of psychic powers. And he said he wouldn't do it. He said, well, ask one of your disciples to do it. And he refused 3 times. He said there are 3 miracles. The miracle of psychic powers, yes. Miracle of being able to read minds, yes. But the miracle of instruction, teaching, was the greatest, because that can really transform how a person sees themselves and how they see the world. And this is the power of right view, samadhi, is that it can change the way we see ourselves and the world. And he gave this teaching at Nalanda. It's called the Kevada Sutta in the... Oh, yes, that's all right. Here we are. This is our tour guide, Dhamraj. He was really a nice person, actually. He was really good and very, very informed.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So in 1 kilometer, they have found 9 monasteries. These are Chaityas, 1, 2, 3. One of the Chaitya is here. 9 monasteries in 1 kilometre. So there we are. So there's another picture of the stupa. It looks pretty impressive, doesn't it? It really does. Oh. There we are. And now we move on to Shravasti, or Savatthi as it was known. Can you see the circle? The circle, it's in the north. So it's not so far from Kapilavastu or Kapilavastu, where he had been born and grew up. And it was his major, the main monastery in his lifetime, actually, Shravasti. And it was the Jetavana Grove that was offered, you can see this name, Anathapindika, the very wealthy. He's the billionaire, I was going to say the Elon Musk of that time, but I don't think that's probably quite... Anyway, he was very wealthy, and he wanted to offer a monastery to the Lord Buddha, and he saw this park, and he thought, fantastic, but it belonged to a prince, Prince Jeta, and the prince was not going to sell it at all. And jokingly, the prince said, oh, if you could cover it with gold coins, then I'd consider selling it. And so Anathapindika took him at his word, and he had truckloads of gold coins delivered, and he started placing them all over the land. And then the prince, realizing this is serious, he's really getting caught up in his generosity, inspired by it perhaps. He said, don't, this area here, no need to put gold coins on it. And so that became the Prince Jeta's Grove. So I don't know how much he gave, but it was quite a lot. And here you can see we're at the what's called the Mulaganda Kuti. And this would probably translate as original or first fragrant kuti because of all the incense around it. And here, what teaching do we associate Savatthi with of the Buddhas? Mangala Sutta, absolutely. And that's what we chanted. And I gave a talk about the Mangala Sutta there and then. So this is, when we journey, this journey is really Buddha-Nissati, but it's also Dhamma-Nissati because we chant and we also contemplate, we talk about the teachings. So we're actually getting both Dhamma-Nissati, Buddha-Nissati and Dhamma-Nissati, this reflecting or recollecting the Dhamma, recollecting the Buddha and recollecting the Dhamma, and at the same time recollecting the Sangha. When we were in Savatthi, we were talking about who's another famous figure
from Savatthi, the one that stands out in many people's minds is Angulimala. So we talked about the Angulimala Sutta. We're doing okay? Yeah. Sadhu. There we are. This is the Ananda Bodhi tree. When the Buddha, Venerable Ananda said to the Buddha, when you're not here, who can people pay respects to? And the Buddha said, they can pay respects to the Bodhi tree. And evidently they bought a cutting of the Bodhi tree from Bodh Gaya for this. They used, according to the story, I think, Venerable Mahamoggallana used his psychic powers to bring it here. And it's called the Ananda Bodhi tree, but this is one that's associated. People would pay respects to when the Buddha wasn't there. We meditated in all the sites pretty much. We meditated, but we did meditate here too. When you're meditating in these holy sites, you need to get away from the buildings. There's too many pilgrims otherwise. The further away you get, the quieter it gets. So there's otherwise chanting and all that. So that is Savatthi. And the Buddha spent 25 vasas there, the 25 rains retreats there. And as he got older, he did less walking, which makes sense. And he was very well supported by, of course, King Pasenadi, Visakha, Anathapindika, and other very wealthy supporters in Savatthi. So another place, and this is Vesali, you can see the circle around it, very, very famous, and a place that the Buddha seemed to be fond of. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Farewell to the World Tour, I call that sutta, the Buddha is when he leaves Vesali. It's the only place it mentions. This is in the narrative. He doesn't say it, but it's in the narrative. He turns back and looks at Vesali for the last time and then goes. And what you're seeing here is the one on the right is a very famous stupa that was at the Ambapali's Grove Monastery. And the other one is a monastery a bit further out, the Kutagara Sala, the hall with a peaked roof, and you can see the Asoka column there. So it was he liked, the Buddha I think was quite fond of it because the Vesali, the Lichavis that lived there, the Vajjayans, were a democratically sort of organised group, and he seemed to like that place and the way they governed the place more democratically. And it was also the birthplace of Nagantha Nataputta, the Mahavira, the leader of the Jains. So I don't know if that's and had a lot of forest from where this the photo on the left is, evidently right to the Himalayas was forest. So it would have been beautiful. And when he was in Vesali, it's where he announced that in 3 months' time he would pass away, and that was. He announced that there, and from there on, he travelled on to various towns. We go straight here to Kusinara or Kushinagara as it's called now. But he was travelling through, and what was he teaching all the time? He's teaching over and over again about ethical behaviour, virtue. He was teaching about meditation, samadhi, and he was teaching about wisdom, developing sila, samadhi, and panya, these three, teaching them again and encouraging us. He said that meditation that's empowered by ethical behaviour is a great fruit, great result. And wisdom that's empowered by meditation, very deep meditation, is of great fruit, great result, great benefit. And a mind that has wisdom is liberated from the attachment to the defilement of sensuality, being attached to the five senses, the desire to be reborn, and ignorance. And he said that's when a person becomes an arahant. But he was teaching that again and again on this farewell to the world tour. And in Kusanagar or Kushanara, we have where he passed away into Parinibbana. And people may recognise on the left is the Parinibbana temple or Parinibbana temple, and behind it is the actual stupa that marks the place where the Buddha passed away. And isn't this a beautiful statue? It's quite a big statue, lying statue. It's quite an old one, and it's very, very, very beautiful. And you'll see there is a tradition to put a golden robe over this Buddha statue. While we sat there, I saw a group do 5 of these golden robes, putting them over the Buddha statue. And that commemorates, at the time of the Buddha, when he was passing away, this person, Pakusa, I think he was a Brahmin, bought a golden robe and they put it over the Buddha's body. And they said that the Buddha's body, just before he passed away, was so glowing and golden that the robe looked dull. So this is a tradition anyway, and people like to do it. Isn't it lovely, that very peaceful appearance? Here we are. And that's the leader of the tour, that Kun Palani. She's the organiser. There we are. And as you can see, we were doing chanting. We did some meditation there. It's a little bit more difficult there because there are usually people coming in and you have to move on, as it were. We actually went outside, which is pretty cold, near the stupa, and there we were able to have a talk. I think we may have even meditated there. We did some meditation here, but it wasn't as long. And this is the famous last words of the Buddha. Come now, mendicants, I say to you, this is the monks and nuns, I say to you all, conditions fall apart, persist with diligence. And this is via Dhamma, Sankara, Apamadena, Sampadetati. And of course this is the nature of life, that everything that is of its condition, that has a beginning, has a cause, all those things are of the nature to decay, to break down, pretty much everything in this world. And the Buddha is saying this body of his is of that nature, it's conditioned phenomena, it will pass away. But they're to strive on with diligence, to persist with diligence, with energy. One of the qualities of the Buddha was to keep going, this energy of striving, of applying oneself. So this is a really important quality in our practice. Persistence is great. It's very easy to get discouraged, but when we have this quality of persistence, it's almost determination, really, aspiration to keep going, then we can develop wisdom. Things will change, we can develop wisdom, we can make breakthroughs. And this is the other famous one, and you probably know this, Anicca Vata Sankhara Upadavaya Dhammino Upajitva Nirojanti Te Sang Vupasamo Sukhoti. And this, of course, is what we chant at all funerals. Oh, conditions are impermanent. Their nature is to arise and fall. Having arisen, they cease. Their stilling is blissful. And you notice that vaya dhammino is there. Upada is arise, vaya dhammino is to fall or to decay, break up. So there we are. And of course, why is it blissful? Because for the Buddha, parinibbana, not coming back to another body, to another life. That's why it's blissful. For most of us, even though we do it at a funeral, or at all funerals really, most people, they're going on to their next life. So it's not going to be the stilling of all these activities. It's going to be a continuation. So that's, and of course after he passed away, between the two sal trees, born under a tree, enlightened under a tree, passed away between two trees. Amazing. Definitely an outdoors person. And here we have where they cremated him, not far from the Parinibbana temple and stupa. So this is the cremation site. And this site, I always felt when I was there in 2001, 2005, that it has a real energy to it. I mean, all the sites I think have, and some different people, they feel that's the energy of a different site. So some people really like this site or another site. And of course, whose favourite site is Kusinara? Ajahn Brahm. He really likes it. So here we are. We were meditating there, and I think I probably talked a little bit. Ah, there we are. And after the Lord Buddha passed away, it was only a couple of months later in the Rains retreat, they convened what they call the First Council. Why did they do this? When Venerable Mahakassapa was coming, he wasn't there when the Buddha passed away. He was coming to Kusinara, and they heard that the Buddha had passed away. And there were various reactions, and this is, you can see it actually at Kusinara too. Some monks just really fell apart. They were very upset and crying and all that. Some were very philosophical. They understood the Dhamma. They really understood the Dhamma. But one monk said, you won't believe this, oh, we're rid of the great monk who was always telling us what to do and what not to do. Now we can do what we like. And so when Mahakassapa heard that, he thought, we've got to get on to the First Council. We've got to organise the teachings of the Buddha. Strangely enough, they had a different organisation of the teachings when the Buddha was alive. They had 9 categories. They had things like, a wonderful category I like, the wonderful, amazing category. It must have been the inspirational category. They had the birth stories, they had the discourses, they had the questions and answers. They had all these different categories that they used. But when they got together at Rajgir for the First Council, they reorganised it differently, very systematically, according to these 5 books, the 5 Nikayas, but the 4 main ones, and the last one is called the Minor collection, but it's actually the biggest because they kept adding to it. So this was at Rajagaha, and this is where they say at the Satapani cave, 500 arahants, or 499 arahants, assembled to recite. What did they recite? They recited the Buddha's teaching, the Dhamma, and they recited the training, the Vinaya. And so this was supposed to happen here. But if you look, the cave is too small. But the tradition is that they built a platform here. The king, Ajatasattu, built a platform right out, even perhaps over the mountain, over the edge of the mountain for the recitation. You couldn't get 500 people in here, 500 monks. And of course, who was the one who wasn't enlightened? Venerable Ananda, that's right. And they invited him to the reciting of the Dhamma and the Vinaya, the teachings and the training, but he was only a stream enterer at that stage. So he spent the whole night meditating, and as dawn was approaching, he thought he might as well get a rest. He hadn't broken through to becoming fully enlightened. And before his head hit the pillow, he became enlightened. And many people think this is what they need to do to become enlightened. But I can tell you, I've laid my head down a number of times, many times, and it hasn't happened like that. So he became an arahant just before his head hit the pillow, and he came. And of course, thank goodness, because he knew all the Buddha's teachings, discourses, which he gave. And one of the conditions, he became the personal, isn't it interesting, had a contract with the Buddha. One of the conditions was that he became personal attendant was that if the Buddha gave a talk anywhere and Venerable Ananda wasn't there, the Buddha would tell him what he'd told, what he'd been speaking, and Venerable Ananda would remember that. Incredible, isn't it? That he would do that. So Venerable Ananda, very, very, very dear to the Buddha, though the Buddha said that he had as much loving kindness, metta, for Devadatta, who was splitting the Sangha. He has as much metta for him. He has as much metta for Ananda, for Devadatta as he has for Ananda. So he was very, very, that metta was universal. And so that was, and very interestingly, when he was passing away, the Buddha was so concerned for others. It's amazing. It was like he was taking care of so many questions and comments that people had made. And one of them was to tell Chunda, the smith, not that it wasn't his fault that the Buddha passed away, but the meal that he had offered him was of as great merit as the first meal he was offered after his awakening. And he also, when Venerable Ananda got very upset and was crying, he called Venerable Ananda, and then he talked about the 4 wonderful and marvellous qualities of Venerable Ananda. Basically, that wherever he goes, people love to hear him, see him, love to hear him, and feel disappointed when he leaves or stops speaking. So that was beautiful. But here at Satapani Cave, this is where they collected the teachings, compiled them, and so this is a very important place. Our tour guide says, no, it's in another place. And so lots of different ideas of where it could have been. But this is the tradition at Satapani Cave. Giving a talk, and I think we might have meditated. Guess who? This is the only way I could make it up and down those mountains, actually, in a palanquin. They call them palanquin, or I think they called them dollies or something like that. I was quite happy, and there were about the 3 others who were too. I think it was an employment scheme that gave them work. And also they got a good deal with me. I was very small and light. It wasn't so much heavy work, but very, very helpful it was. Yeah. So that was the first council. And of course, after the 4 holy sites, as we call them, we went to New Delhi. And you don't associate holy sites with New Delhi, but they have probably the best relics of the Buddha from the Kapilavatthu in that museum. And they displayed much better than they were in 2005. 2005, they were just in a gallery you just walked through. Now they have their own room, and it's quite nicely decorated too, themed to the Buddha's passing away. And these relics come from the Buddha's hometown, and they say that it looks like this stupa was never disturbed, maybe out of respect for his the fact that it was the Buddha's hometown. There were 3 levels to this stupa, And all the two top levels were opened and relics taken from there. But this one wasn't until 1970. And so what you see, can you see in the glass case here, some quite large pieces of bone? And it's very obviously some sort of remains. And it was quite emotional time for people. There were a few tears here, quite a few tears here, as we did some chanting and paid respects to the physical remains of the Buddha. And of course, physical remains are one thing, the dhatu, but of course, what's the most important remains of the Buddha? Dhamma. It is, absolutely. So this is this is how we can meet the Buddha, actually, how we can experience the same things that the Buddha experienced. And when we do that, then we see the Buddha, actually, because we know this is what he experienced too. So this was a beautiful place, actually. It was really nice. And evidently we didn't see it, but Ajahn Brahmali's group went to it. More relics upstairs, but not necessarily these Buddha relics, like this Buddha relics. They went here as well. And so you can see the spread of Buddhism. I can't see Australia on that map, can you? That's what I think, something missing. And it shows how Buddhism, this like a courtyard of rooms showed the spread of Buddhism in different periods, different Mahayana and later traditions, Vajrayana and so on. So. This is a whole group. Isn't it beautiful? The room's quite nicely done. And we call it a reliquary. The case that contains the relics was offered by the King of Thailand quite a long time ago. I think the previous king, not the current one. So it's really nicely displayed. Very respectful, this one is. And then we went to a place that's not part of the 4 holy sites at all, but it's really interesting. It was really much, much better than I could have imagined, actually. As it says, these enchanting caves, and they were near a trade route going from the south of India to the north, and they date from the 2nd century BC. And you can see it's a valley. The interesting thing with these caves is they're not natural caves. They made the caves by taking rock out. And when you see some of these caves, you think, wow, that's a lot of rock. I remember one of them, this is at Elora, they said over 500,000 tons of rock were excavated over a 200-year period. So these are really big effort. And what would they do? What they would do with the excavated rock, some of it they could make statues out of and things like that. But it's incredible. And what these caves show you is beautiful paintings and sculptures. Some of the painting techniques our guide was pointing out, they're only later rediscovered in the Renaissance. So this is 2nd century BC, the painting techniques where you use shadow and things like that to define a face and perspective and all these sorts of things that became the hallmark of the Renaissance. They're here at Ajanta. And it's very, very beautiful. It's got a very, very nice atmosphere, I felt anyway. And you can see here inside some of the one in the centre, this big cathedral-like building. And here you get an idea of what some of the architecture around the time of the Buddha would have looked like. This is probably the 2nd century BC or a bit later, and these little stupas, and they were monasteries that had their own their own shrine, as it were. This would be the shrine area, and you can see some of us sitting there. We meditated there. It was nice. I had a very good feeling there. And you can see the Sangha here. We had one Anagarika from Dhammasara. And there's Ayasanta, myself, Ajahn Bodhidharma, Venerable Nissarano, but no Ajahn Chunda there. You see some of the paintings a little bit left, but there are some others that are in much better condition. This one, I think this is the Bodhisattva in his home in the palace. Beautiful architecture. This is all carved out of rock, solid rock. And after the Ajanta caves were used from the 2nd century BC to about 480 BC, sometimes they say 600. And then, due to perhaps a change in the trade route, which supported those caves, those 30 Buddhist caves, all Buddhist caves, then the trade route changed and they built these Ellora caves. The Ellora caves are very interesting because, as it mentions here, it was Hindus, Buddhists and Jains, and evidently, according to our tour guide, they all coexisted peacefully together. And this started in the 6th century. So it sort of took over from what Ajanta was like. And you can see some of the architecture very similar. And you notice, so you can see the picture here, and the map, and the red dot is where we are. And the difference between the Ajanta caves and the Ellora caves, the Buddha images in the Ajanta caves, all sitting. In the Ellora caves, they're all sitting on a chair, sitting on a chair. They're probably more from Mahayana period. And you can see us here meditating. And some of these places have really good atmosphere for meditating, actually. So there we are. And the 2 photos on the left are the famous Hindu temple, really. It's not in a cave as such. This is the place where 500,000 tons of rock was excavated. And it's just incredible. Just a very big contrast to the very plain Buddhist temple compared to all the figures and the essential qualities of this Hindu temple. And then you can see Venerable Nito, not in his tent as usual, and Venerable Vasaga and myself. And this is a little video gives you an idea anyway what it's like. So just carve it out of the mountain. And we can go inside and see what one of these areas is like. This is more like shrine room, probably, where they would have been chanting, maybe some meditation. So, and you can see here, this is very typical. All the Buddhist statues in the Ellora cave seem to be sitting on a chair. So if you sit on a chair to meditate, you can see it was common even then. So I think this would have been used for a shrine room for devotional practice, for meditation. So that gives you an idea of the pilgrimage that we did. And these extra places that we went to were really interesting too. They were much more interesting than I actually thought they would. If you're interested in this, an ebook copy of this, but it's actually much bigger. It's got a lot of suttas that are called snapshots from the life of the Buddha by the Buddha. So that's the ebook that was done for the pilgrimage. Thanks to, again, Ayya Santa. It was her handiwork, beautifully done. And this is, of course, the group you saw at the National Museum, and the organiser was Palani, Kun Palani, and Pat Ong too. And we had 60 participants. I thought there were 61 actually, but maybe I'm miscounting. And so it was a pilgrimage that was incredible. It was my last, I think, so I'm pretty sure it's my last. So very, very thankful for that, especially to Kun Palani or Mrs. Palani, Pasang Ying and Patricia Ang. And of course, you didn't see, but we had these little earpieces. You might have thought we were on the phone, but we were actually able to listen to talks without everybody being deafened around us or impacting others. We didn't have a boom box, as they call them. And so this was organised by Ayya Santa. Brilliant. It was really brilliant. It was really good. And she looked after that. And that's not only, just finding them. You have to recharge them every night and count them and look after them. So she took care of those, and that was a very great blessing actually to have that. So it made it peaceful. And let's see what the next one is. Is that it? Oh, hey, we've seen that one, so we can stop. We've seen that one already, I think. Did we see that? Oh no, this one it's only 2 minutes. This is more the meditation side, so I like this one. We saw the other one. It was cold. This is Pat, one of the organisers. And this is mother and daughter who are on the tour together, Liz and Katia. And they're from Norway, these men. Our very own Monica, but I don't think she's here actually. This is at Prague Bodhi, that cave where the Buddha discovered he was practicing the wrong way, Bodhisattva. This is the final night before we left India. So there we are. That's lovely, isn't it? That one is very nice. And as I say, that's really where we meet the Buddha, is when we meditate, when we also contemplate the Buddha's teachings, the message, and actually realise those teachings, because that's the point of it, and then free the mind from all the defilements. The greatest happiness, being free of all this burden of these negative mind states, and free of having another birth, keep going in samsara. So I'd like to finish there, and if people have any comments, questions... Oh, no, you've got the announcements, have you? Oh, there are a few slides. Wait a minute. Thank you. Oh, righto, yes. If you want to see all of the videos that the pilgrimage, there are 4 videos. The main one, we didn't see the main one before. We started only at the Bamboo Grove, but the earlier section is available on one of these video links. So please have a look at them. There's 3 other videos, including that one that we just watched. You watched one before we started. I wasn't going to show those ones. They were just because they were only of interest to people actually that were on the pilgrimage, really. But it does show, what's the main thing you do on pilgrimage? Travel. It's travel. It is. That's right. And the amount of time actually at the sites is not that great. You keep moving too, so it gets very tiring. So this is from Ajahn Bodhinyana, and this is his Relax and Grow retreats, but he's also got the pilgrimage videos there. And the one on the right is the actual images for, the one left is the actual image for the main one, In the Buddha's Footsteps, it's called. And it's 11 minutes, so it's not very long. So there we are. Oh, that's it. The end. We've got to the end. There we are. Beyond the pilgrimage, finding the Buddha in the heart of the journey. I say the journey goes on. It's not just pilgrimage. It's our lives. So may we find the Buddha in this journey, in this life, not go on to other lives. There we are. Righto, Sweet Truth. Yes.
Well, thank you, Ajahn, for taking us on that journey.
Yes.
And Ayasanta, as always, for providing the visuals for us. So thank you very much for putting the pack together for Ajahn and for us. Okay, I think maybe we are out of time, but maybe we can take one quick question, Ajahn.
Yes, yeah, we can. Yeah. Any questions, comments or complaints? It's too long. No, hopefully it encourages you to go on a pilgrimage sometime, because it is a real experience when you actually visit the places where the Buddha lived. And, it's time to finish. Why? Oh, turned off the speakers. Oh, this one here, yeah. That's it. I think it's a sign. Any questions, comments that people have? Yeah, back here. Yes, Dr. Joy. Have you been? You've been. Yeah. Comment? Yeah.
I went there in 1997. Looks like from what you showed, the places look much more organized and cleaner. So it looks like the Indian government is doing much more to preserve the tradition. I'm very happy about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There seems to be some development in some of the sites, and certainly they have so many tourists. Somebody told me the number of tourists that go to the Buddhist site is really considerable for India, actually, so it's in their interest. And of course the Bamboo Grove, very nicely looked after now. The other sites are fairly similar to what they were, but they are nice and they're looked after. So, yeah, thank you for that comment, yeah. They are a treasure. I think India is awakening to that too, appreciating that perhaps. Yeah. So that's it.